basically what PPI is, it's a way of involving the public or your patients actually in your research. So not as participants in your research, so not where they're giving you samples, which is also a very important field, but actually in the decision making around your research. So that could be in priority setting, it could be in communications around your research, it can be in the governance of your research. So basically just making sure that when you're funded to do something that has supposed to have an output for patients, that they keep you on track to make sure that that patient derived output is actually always focused in your mind. Patient involvement is really important in research. It's basically it's a best practice really in research because you're taking account of the real life experiences of patients. So from the patient point of view, the public basically provide the funds for research. So on a very fundamental stage, you need to be able to show what you have done with those funds, how you have spent the money that the public has given you for research. And you need to be transparent and accountable in what you do. So you need to be able to explain your research in a way that is understandable by the public. The other thing is that you need to make sure your research is relevant. So if you are researching a specific disease, how can it be relevant if you haven't spoken to the people that live with that disease day in, day out? So it helps to increase the relevance of your research. For researchers, public involvement is really important because it takes you out of the really narrow field of your research and it puts it back in context. So it's not just the patient or patients, they're real people who have real lives, and you, by speaking with them and having a really open dialogue, you get a much better understanding about the impact of what you're studying and actually how your research can fit in, and that can help you improve on the relevance of your research. It can also create new ideas for you as a researcher, so it cuts down on research waste and it helps you increase the relevance of your research. I think as it becomes more standard practice and people see the benefits, so increasingly, even in various societies and professional societies, you are having patient advocacy as members of the board, as part of the people that produce recommendations for certain groups. And the people who tend to sit on that tend to be quite senior in the clinical side. So once they start to see the benefit, it will naturally filter down. Introducing it very early on in the career stage for junior doctors and junior researchers as well would be very beneficial because they are not as entrenched in the standard practice, and so they tend to be much, if it is introduced as a normal best practice way to do research, then that is how they will kind of evolve and develop as having it as a normal part of their practice. A lot of publications are already asking you for a lay abstract. So some of them are asking you for quite a short one, and some of them will be quite clear, so they can tweet it out. And others are asking for maybe a 100-word summary in plain English as to what is happening. It's because they're trying to get a broader audience. So it's already happening that they're asking for you to basically explain your research in plain English. But what a lot of people may not be aware of is that journals are increasingly bringing on patient reviewers. So the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, is, I suppose, one of the first in its field for doing this. They have patient reviewers. So now when you submit a paper, in a similar way that they ask you about your ethics statement, they ask you about how you've involved patients in your research. They also have patient reviewers. So the same way as it'll be sent out for peer review, it will also be sent out for patient review. And you need to pass both to get it published. So this is already starting to happen and starting to evolve. But especially when you're talking about communications, having accessible research is important not just for the public but for other scientists as well. It helps it be more understandable by a broader field, which can only be a good thing. So as part of helping researchers to become more comfortable with PPI, we had a workshop today where we had some of our patients act as mentors in plain English for our researchers. So in advance of today's meeting, we asked our researchers to prepare a lay summary. So by lay summary, it's basically a summary of the research that should be understandable by everybody. So they prepared that in advance, and then we did a workshop with our patients to actually see how accessible that work really was. So first thing we did was what's called a jargon dictionary. So we had our patient mentors in plain English. They underlined all the words that they didn't understand. And let's just say our jargon dictionary is quite extensive. So we then didn't stop at that. We then brainstormed what are the other words or phrases that we can use instead of these more complicated words. The other thing we did was working on our key message. So what is the key message that you need the public to know about your research? Why is it important? Why should it be important for them to fund you to do this research? Where is the public good in it? So we did an awful lot of work about that, and also where that should be when you're doing a lay abstract. Should it be buried down the bottom as your last line and conclusion, or should it be kind of more of your highlight to entice people to actually read further? We also did a bit about narrative, because a lot of the times when we write for science or for research publications, we have to be very clear, concise, and really quite boring with our language to make sure it's correct. Whereas when you're writing for the public, you still need to be very accurate and very concise in what you're doing, but you need to have more narrative. You need to engage the public. You need to kind of bring them on a story with your research as well, so that they can relate to it more, because it's very difficult to read about something that is happening in a lab or happening in a xenograft was one of the words we had today. You know, they seem very foreign concepts, so you need to make it comfortable, you need to make it accessible for them to be able to read. So our researchers are going to now, with the help of their patient mentor and all the input that they've gotten, redo their abstracts and hopefully have it truly accessible to the public.